Have you ever felt the world press its verdict upon you before you even begin, telling you who you are, what you can't be, and where your story must end? Imagine hearing that verdict in a world where even the stars were said to belong to men, then building your own constellation anyway. This is the story of Empress Wu Zetian, the only female emperor of China, the Iron Empress of Vision, who did not just rise, she rewrote the rules of rising. Her journey is not merely ancient history. It's a playbook for anyone who dares to lead, disrupt, and envision beyond what others think possible. In the vast corridors of the Tang dynasty, where silk whispered and power moved like a shadow, a young girl named Wu Zhao learned early what most never discover: that destiny is not a gift you receive, it's a claim you must make. Born to a family of means, but not nobility of the highest order, she began her climb in the imperial court as a concubine, one among many, a footnote in the ledger of emperors. Yet she stood apart, not through privilege, but through vision, grit, and the strategic patience of a leader who knows that time is a blade that sharpens the bold. Wu watched. She listened. She studied poetry, philosophy, statecraft. She mastered the art of presence, the kind that turns a room before a word is spoken. She grasped the subtle mathematics of influence, who moves whom and how, where tradition binds and where it breaks. She learned that power, like water, finds its own level. And she learned how to carve new rivers. When Emperor Taizong died, convention dictated her fate. She was to retire to a Buddhist convent. But Wu Zhao was not a woman who let convention write her story. Through wit, compassion, and an unflinching belief in her own worth, she returned to court and became consort to his successor, Emperor Gaozong. She did not return as a passenger. She returned as a navigator. As a consort, she was no mere ornament. She was a strategist, an administrator, a political force who understood that the palace walls held both beauty and battles. She navigated rivalries and intrigues with quiet ferocity, balancing the incense of ritual with the steel of reform. Over time, she rose, first to empress consort, then to regent, and then, in a leap that shattered one of the oldest ceilings on earth, to emperor, Huangdi, not empress in the shadow of a man, but emperor in her own right, the only woman to sit on the dragon throne, a title wrestled not from nobles, but from the limits of possibility. In the West, we're taught that history moves forward with heroes. Washington leading along the icy Delaware, Harriet Tubman guiding souls to freedom, Eleanor Roosevelt drafting human rights into our bones. In the East, Empress Wu stands in that same chorus of audacity. She expanded examinations that allowed talent, not lineage, to rise, inviting scholars of merit into the engine room of empire. She strengthened state institutions, improved agriculture, and supported the printing of Buddhist sutras, seeding a culture of literacy and spiritual inquiry. She reimagined the relationship between the center and the provinces, insisting that governance be felt not just in the capital, but in the fields where hands met soil. She understood a timeless truth. Power is not only seized, it must be justified by service. Yet leadership does not come wrapped in flowers. Her rule was controversial. Chronicles written by those she dislodged, or those who could not imagine a woman wearing the myth of the dragon, accuse her of ruthlessness. Perhaps she was. But show me a ruler who holds an empire for decades, amid famine, faction, and foreign threat, without resolve that cuts clean. Show me a leader of any era who reforms entrenched systems without making enemies of those who feast on entrenchment. Leadership at scale is not softness, it's stewardship. And stewardship requires decisions that echo long after applause or condemnation fades. If you are reading this in America, You know the friction of contradiction. We celebrate freedom but wrestle with our history. We invite dreamers while debating the cost of dreams. Empress Wu's story meets us in that storm. She reminds us that greatness is rarely pure, that vision is not a candle, it is a forge. And those who step into the forge must be ready to temper the world's iron with their own. Consider the moments that defined her vision. She restructured the civil service exam system, amplifying the path of merit over aristocracy. In modern terms, she fought the algorithm of bias and rewrote it to recognize brilliance where it lived, not just where it was born. How many lives today remain unopened letters because the envelope is from the wrong zip code? Wu saw talent as a national resource. She mined it. She invested in agriculture and public works, recognizing that political legitimacy springs from full granaries and reliable roads. Prosperity is policy, not accident. She ensured that faith in leadership could be tasted as rice in a bowl and felt as a bridge underfoot. She reimagined the relationship between the center and the provinces, insisting that governance be felt not just in the capital, but in the fields where hands met soil. She understood a timeless truth. Power is not only seized, it must be justified by service. Yet leadership does not come wrapped in flowers. Her rule was controversial. Chronicles written by those she dislodged or those who could not imagine a woman wearing the myth of the dragon accuse her of ruthlessness. Perhaps she was. But show me a ruler who holds an empire for decades amid famine, faction, and foreign threat without resolve that cuts clean. Show me a leader of any era who reforms entrenched systems without making enemies of those who feast on entrenchment. Leadership at scale is not softness, it's stewardship. And stewardship requires decisions that echo long after applause or condemnation fades. If you are reading this in America, you know the friction of contradiction. We celebrate freedom but wrestle with our history. We invite dreamers while debating the cost of dreams. Empress Wu's story meets us in that storm. She reminds us that greatness is rarely pure, that vision is not a candle, it is a forge. And those who step into the forge must be ready to temper the world's iron with their own. Consider the moments that defined her vision. She restructured the civil service exam system, amplifying the path of merit over aristocracy. In modern terms, she fought the algorithm of bias and rewrote it to recognize brilliance where it lived, not just where it was born. How many lives today remain unopened letters because the envelope is from the wrong zip code? Wu saw talent as a national resource. She mined it. She invested in agriculture and public works, recognizing that political legitimacy springs from full granaries and reliable roads. Prosperity is policy, not accident. She ensured that faith in leadership could be tasted as rice in a bowl and felt as a bridge underfoot. She elevated the role of Buddhism, commissioning sutras and supporting monasteries, not just as religious acts, but as cultural infrastructure. It was a soft power strategy centuries ahead of its time. And understanding that the stories we tell ourselves become the scaffolding of our civilization. She re-established the new dynasty in her own name, the Zhou, symbolically stepping outside the Tan lineage to declare a different kind of authority. Imagine founding a startup inside a centuries-old conglomerate and then convincing the market to believe in your brand. That required not just audacity, but execution. Results became her speechwriter. And yes, she faced plots and engineered counterplots. She survived coups, whispers, daggers behind curtains. But in a palace where intrigue was oxygen, she breathed deeper. She treated power not as a treasure to hoard, but as a tool to shape. And in that shaping, she left fingerprints on centuries. What does this mean for you, for me, for anyone striving to build, lead, or rise today. Start where you are, but do not stay where you're placed. Wu entered the court as a concubine. She exited as emperor. Your entry point is not your end point. The title you hold is not your ceiling. The room you're in is not the whole house. Build merit as your engine. She didn't rely on inherited favor alone. She built systems that valued skill. In a world that often pays lip service to talent, make yourself undeniable. Collect competence like currency. Study the game until the game starts studying you. Practice strategic patience. Not every hill is the hill to take. Wu moved when the door opened a fraction and then widened it with her shoulder.
Hold your fire until you can see your target, then shoot true. Invest in infrastructure, not just image. She fed people, built roads, and funded learning. In your life, that means habits, relationships, tools, and health. Infrastructure compounds, image depreciates. Accept the price of vision. If you are reshaping systems, some will resist. If you are building something real, someone will misunderstand. If you are changing the story, someone will try to close the book. Keep writing. There's a scene I love to imagine, not found in any scrolls, but true in spirit. The Iron Empress of Vision stands on a high terrace at dawn, the city below still in the hush before the market song. The palace behind her glows with the last lamps of the night. She looks east, where the clouds are wounds about to heal into light. She has outlived rivals, seasons, rumors. She has signed decrees that will outlive her. She has been called monster and mother, visionary and villain. But the sun does not adjudicate. It rises. And in that rising, every choice she made becomes part of the day. She breathes in. She breathes out. She chooses again. That is the crux of leadership, choosing again. Not once, not when it's easy, not when applause is thick, but every morning. To be emperor is not to be obeyed, it is to be responsible. And responsibility is a crown that weighs more than gold.
When Emperor Gaozong's health failed, she stepped into governance with a clarity that startled her critics. She chaired councils, issued edicts, calmed borders, and kept the grain moving. In time, she did what none thought possible and many deemed improper. She claimed the dragon's title. She did not ask permission from history because history had never been asked to imagine her. And here is the practical magic she wielded: narrative. She reframed her ascent as destiny fulfilled, aligning her rule with celestial omens and the moral order of the time. The lesson is not mysticism, it's messaging. Every leader must answer the question, why you? Why now? Wu's answer was layered: merit, mandate, momentum. She built a narrative scaffold strong enough to carry a nation's doubts. Critics will point to the methods, harsh, sometimes brutal. They will recount trials, purges, the quieting of dissent. History's ledger is complicated ink, but each era writes with the grammar it inherits. What astonishes is not that she wielded the hard tools of power. It's that she wielded them to build long-term competence in the state. She didn't simply hold power, she applied it. For U.S. readers navigating boardrooms, classrooms, startups, campaigns, let Wu's story be less a museum and more a mirror. Are you hiring for pedigree or performance? Are you building rituals that anchor your culture, not just slogans that decorate it? Are you positioning your vision within a larger narrative people can believe in and carry forward? Are you willing to take the arrows that come with firsts? First woman, first immigrant, first in your family to graduate, first to found, knowing that someone must go before so others can go beyond. Empress Wu Zetian's reign eventually ended, as all reigns do. She abdicated, and the Tang dynasty returned to the throne. The chroniclers resumed their familiar rhythms, many with ink sharpened against her legacy. Yet the reforms she planted continued to bear fruit. The examination system she amplified would shape Chinese civil service for centuries. The roads remained, the institutions endured. The memory of a woman on the dragon throne kept a quiet vigil in the imaginations of generations. It is one thing to rule. It is another to leave a structure still standing after the trumpets fade. Perhaps the most striking truth about Wu Zetian is not that she defied a man's world. It's that she helped define a human world, one where greatness could be argued for in deeds. That is why her story crosses oceans and centuries to sit with us today. She calls us not only to admire her audacity, but to practice our own. She asks, what empire of service, creativity, justice will you build? Let's bring this closer. Think of your life as a dynasty in the making. What is your capital? Your core values? What are your provinces, your projects and people? What is your civil service exam? The standards you hold yourself and your team to. Clear, fair, rising. What is your road and granary? Your habits and resources that keep the mission fed when storms hit. And what is your narrative mandate? The story that says, why you? Why now? Write these things down. Declare them not in marble, but in motion. Because here's the secret. You don't need a throne to be an emperor. You need a vision that serves more than yourself, a strategy that survives the weather, and the courage to take the next right step, especially when the hall is full of whispers. If you've ever felt underestimated because of your gender, background, accent, age, Wu Zetian's life is an ember you can carry. When doubt comes, remember the girl in the concubine's quarters who learned the machinery of a world that wasn't built for her, and then rebuilt it anyway. When fear comes, remember the regent who signed policies in the space between rumor and revolt, and fed her people. When fatigue comes, remember the emperor who stood at dawn, choosing again. Choose again. Today, let your leadership be less about titles and more about tectonics. Slow, steady continental shifts that remake the map beneath everyone's feet. Build systems that outlast you. Tell a story big enough to welcome others. And when they say it's impossible, smile like someone who's already measured the distance and packed for the journey. Because impossibility is often just history's way of saying, no one has done this yet. Empress Wu Zetian, the Iron Empress of Vision, did it. So can you. Call to action. If this story lit a spark, don't let it fade. Take one step today that honors Wu Zetian's playbook. Set a merit-based standard for your team. Commit to a habit that builds your infrastructure. Or articulate your mission in one sentence that others can believe in and carry forward. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that ceilings are only ceilings until someone stands on them. Lead with vision. Build with courage. Choose again.